Hello, I'm Trevor Lucero, and I'm here today to talk to you guys about The Startup Way by Ries. So, Ries wrote The Startup Way to help businesses within their startup process and young entrepreneurs to help them succeed as their business grows, right? So, he starts off the book with a great example that I'm going to share with you guys of when he was working with GE. So GE was on a mission to design this new Series X engine that they were calling it. The Series X engine was supposed to be a ultra fuel efficient, super innovative engine that was going to kind of revolutionize the market. He was sitting in a room with a bunch of young engineers who were working on the project and entrepreneurs, and they were very excited about this project, right? They thought it was going to make a huge splash in the market and be a huge success. What Ries asked all of these young engineers and everything that really caught them off guard is, well, what is this engine used for? You know, is it to go in an airplane or a boat? Who's going to buy it? Who's interested in this engine? And they kind of didn't have an answer for him. So that's not to say that the engine itself wasn't successful, but he kind of pointed out some flaws in their venture here that, you might have a great engine here, but it needs to actually be applicable to the market that you're trying to sell it. So what Ries did, what he suggested, and the company ended up moving forward with, was that they design a smaller kind of prototype engine of this Series X engine, then release that to market, which they did, and it gained popularity, and it kind of introduced people to this new engine they were making, and they were able to make it in a couple of months rather than a couple of years. What this did is it brought a lot of attention to GE and this new engine that helped them to pursue this Series X engine to be exactly what they wanted it to be. So this is kind of where a lot of companies or individuals might get stuck within the startup process. They have a great idea or a brand new innovation that they come up with, and they think this is going to be it, this is going to hit the market and completely take off. Usually it's not a lack of a good idea, it's a lack of being able to follow a process for the startup way that will ultimately lead to success. And that's kind of what Ries talks about in this book. So he comes up with 5 key principles of the startup way philosophy, right? In order, they are continuous innovation, startup and atomic growth within your company, the missing function of entrepreneurship, the second founding, and then ultimately continuous transformation. So a good example of a company that kind of successfully went through these 5 principles is Airbnb. So most of you are probably familiar with Airbnb. They're an online marketplace for hospitality services, where you can go online and rent somebody else's house or apartment for a vacation, things like that. So Airbnb was experimental in itself, right? They weren't even sure if the idea was going to work or if it was really going to take off in market, and that's kind of where it was innovative, right? The founders of Airbnb, they were continuously trying to be innovative, and this was one of their ideas. So they were already off on the right foot for the startup way philosophy. Next, startup as atomic growth. So what Ries described with this is having startups within your startup, especially as the company grows. A lot of times you lose that kind of startup mindset and that enthusiasm. So if you have startups within your company, they can branch out to other startups as well, and you kind of get this atomic growth as he describes it. You get tons of new ideas. Not all of them are going to work, of course, but tons of new ideas to go off of that will hopefully lead to innovation within your company. And then the missing function of entrepreneurship. Airbnb was always looking for what's next. How can we improve? Let's take customer feedback. Let's make it better. Let's not stop changing the company, because they know that you can't just sit on a good idea and leave it. You have to keep being entrepreneurial, right? And then the second founding. So Airbnb added what they call trips, Airbnb trips, to their company. Airbnb trips not only allowed you to rent a house or an apartment from somebody, but plan out your entire trip, right? So this is something that allowed the company to branch out and not just do the same thing over and over. They were able to kind of reinvent themselves. And this leads into the continuous transformation, which is the last step of the key principles that Ries talks about, which is you can't always stay the same. So the continuous transformation that Airbnb saw is the market's always changing, technology is always changing, so they have to keep up with that. In this case, they created an app, right? App on your phone that you can do everything online, but now in an app form, keeping up with the market. Simple as that. And then, in addition, Ries talks about kind of the comparison between old style companies and then a more modern company. So if we take Airbnb as a modern company and then compare them to, say, major automotive companies, right? Especially in kind of the earlier 2000s when a lot of the automotive companies were not doing so well, we can see the differences between a very old school company and a modern company. Old school companies like to pursue big projects, right? They're expensive, they're slow because they get caught up in all the bureaucracy of the company, and they may or may not be successful, but it takes a lot more resources compared to where a modern company likes to pursue a portfolio of much smaller investments, and they can have more of them as well. Older companies, in addition, they like to have their employees working all the time, right? So it's kind of, if the employee is not working, then they're not being productive. And this isn't always true, and a lot of modern companies kind of see that. They see it more as they want to promote entrepreneurship within the company, right? So that's entrepreneurship inside the company from employees. So if the employees themselves have an entrepreneurial mindset, they're actually going to produce better results, right? Not only that, but they will not feel like they're being pressured to work. They'll be more invested in the company, and ultimately it's a win-win situation because the employees are happier and the company is actually receiving better results. So this is something that a lot of kind of old school companies fail to see, whereas the modern company, it's not as strict with employees. It's more, again, that entrepreneurial mindset that they try to employ. Then kind of lastly, older companies don't like failure at all, right? It's all about the bottom line. It's all about, this has to work. There's no room for failure, right? Modern companies, they like to take more risks. They realize this might, result in failure per se, but a lot of times we can learn from our failures, and we've seen that over and over, learning from failures, right? So modern companies are willing to take those risks, even if it means a little bit of failure, to have a better end result in the long run. To kind of wrap things up, we can also see how a lot of these older companies are actually shifting towards this entrepreneurial mindset and starting to use the startup way philosophy that Ries describes. So back to those older automotive companies, like I said, in the earlier 2000s, a lot of them weren't doing well. There was the whole the bailouts and everything that was happening. So if you look at an automotive company now, especially some of the bigger ones, they're kind of taking on these entrepreneurial mindsets. They're coming out with more cars more often, newer features and everything, and they're really just trying to be more innovative and look for that what's next feature. Again, that's something that Ries really pushes. Ries does a good job in this book of not trying to sell the reader on his ideas. He doesn't say, this is how it is, I'm right, and this is how it's got to be. He is more teaching the reader, right? He tries to teach them that, hey, I have a lot of experience, this is what I've seen, this is what I believe works, and this is what doesn't. And I really like that because, somebody trying to sell something, it seems pushy, whereas Ries was more of a teacher, and I really believe that he did a good job and that his advice should be taken seriously. But that about wraps it up for this. Overall, yeah, thank you.